Tech Girls is excited to announce a new topic that we're adding to our library called Internet Safety. Today I have with me Judy Johnson and Ralph Wright, who put together this workshop, and they're going to walk through the details on how to teach this. Ralph or Judy, can you tell me a little bit about just the background of what this workshop's about?
You want me to do that? I can do that. We gave a cybersecurity talk a few months ago. We've done it a few times. And at the end of the talk, we realized that some of the kids and even some of the parents were asking questions about more basic cybersecurity questions, and they were really like internet safety. Like, somebody sent me an email and asked me for this, or how do I do a password? So we're like, maybe we should take a step back and we didn't think it needed to be as long, but we thought maybe we'd take a step back and do the internet safety to kind of eke them in on the more basic things that we thought everybody knew, but they didn't. Does that
help? Okay, yeah, that sounds great. And then specifically, like, what are the goals? What are you hoping that the girls are going to learn or walk away with after taking the workshop?
Well, I guess, with them being online all the time, just to be safe and to be good internet citizens, really. Ralph?
Well, that about says it all. They need to learn how to be responsible, especially a lot of the tech girl classes are using some of these online tools. Maybe not so much the social media, but they're using web browsers and communicating with people. So we just want them all to learn how to be safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds great. And then is there anything specific that an instructor would need to run the workshop, or any way that they should prepare?
They should, it's really just the slides and a web browser. There are some videos to play, so make sure they're familiar with playing videos that are embedded in slides through Zoom. I'll talk a little bit, but there is one game that can be a little slow on certain computers, but there's a way to turn down the graphics on that.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll turn it over to you and let you go through the slides and certainly point out any important points that need to be covered on each slide, and really any helpful hints that you could give.
Okay. So on the first slide, it's just the opening slide. The next slide includes all the Zoom basics. It's just a good idea to go over this. You can't assume that any girl or any student has had a Zoom class before. Make sure you talk to the girls about being respectful to each other and about how to use the chat. We've always gotten great support from Tech Girls representative during the class to help us with these things. And split screen is optional. It's useful maybe if you're doing some of the games and you want to have the chat window open at the same time in Zoom. So the agenda and the general flow is introductions and icebreaker. It's one big block on digital responsibility to talk about electronic communications and etiquette and cyberbullying. And then there's another big block, a second big block after a break to talk about, now you've learned some of the things that are dangerous, how you can protect yourself. And that would include making sure you separate your online and offline life, being safe with social media, and protecting your information. So the introduction slide, the teachers should introduce themselves. I think that Judy would agree that the girls always seem to get a kick out of hearing instructors and the TAs talk about what they do for a living. Icebreaker, we have a couple of digital icebreakers that we recommend. The girls seem to like answering questions in the chat when this happens. I think last time we made it, I think the first time, or the only time we taught this class, we might have actually did the super villain or the favorite superhero, or what kind of superhero would you want to be, which was a really neat talk to listen to see what the girls thought their superpowers could be. But we left a couple of options for you, and it's probably a good time to mention too, there's notes in almost every slide, excuse me, so you don't have to feel bound to anything that we see, or any one thing. You can pick what you want. It's also a good time to mention that when you see certain things in the slides later on, it was a snapshot in time in October. So we talk a lot about Instagram and some other things, but at the time, a good example would be is that Among Us was not as popular in October, but it is now. So I think it's important that as you go through the slides that you think of ways to bring it in context or put things in context of any new technologies that you think people might be using.
And the news stories too. We had some timely news stories, so that's always a good one to go over beforehand.
It is indeed, you're right. Yeah, it's actually a great point. The news stories and the technology clips and stuff that we have, you probably want to review the slides before you teach the class, see if there are any that are frankly completely out of date, or you might find some more relevant and recent ones. On the why you are here today slide, it's just an explanation to make sure the girls understand what they're here to learn. They'll get some of it from the introduction. And then this is when we really begin the content. So we like to set the context here and talk about different ways that the audience might be connected. We call it internet safety, but the internet is used very loosely. And so we mention a lot of things that they might be into, or they might have access to, or might have seen someone have access to. And so this is a list that was, as of October, you can add, delete, or you can pause here and ask the girls what other things that they might have access to. In fact, we have a slide. So there's actually a prompt there to pause and ask the audience what other ways they might be connected that we missed.
Yeah, I think when we're online, we like to ask them a lot of questions because they're not right there with you. So it gives them a little feel that you're in the same place.
Right, and that's a great point because this class may be not as hands-on as some of the other Tech Girls class that I know we've taught. So look for as many ways as you can to pause and get them to put things in the chat. Ask them to volunteer to say something rather than just put it in the chat, although I think the Zoom preference seems to be the chat.
Until you ask them to show their pets.
Yes, and then everyone turns on their camera and brings their pets. So you talk a little bit about why the topic is important. Let them know that it's understandable that they want to be online and they have to be online, in fact, for most of their lives, but make sure that they understand that there are bad people out there that want your information or access to things that you should consider private.
And also, I'm sorry, I'm doing this now.
Go ahead, keep going.
Also that their behavior online and things that affect them online also affect the people around them.
Yep.
And their future.
Yep. This is the slide Judy mentioned a few minutes ago. These are news clips. We don't need to go through them in the teaching class, but we suggest you read these, make sure they're still relevant, make sure they resonate. Feel free to replace them or add to them with anything you might see in the current news. But the idea here is that they understand that we aren't just teaching them these things for the fun of it, that there are actually real life consequences.
And Ralph, also on that slide, it's just a reminder too to think before you post something, that it'll live on for a while.
Absolutely.
Probably forever.
Yep.
So they have to really think about what they post.
Yep. The next slide is the first of, I think, 3 activities, maybe 2 activities. It's a quiz, and it's meant to get them thinking about what their current profile is or what their current sort of characteristics are of the way they use the internet. Make sure you explain that there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no good or bad answer. But we want to get them thinking about how they currently behave on the internet. And you should, before you teach the class, take the quiz yourself. It's actually pretty neat. But what we've done is on the following slide, we've put the actual types. So you don't have to go through the full quiz. Everyone does it, but you won't see all the options. But you can ask the girls, what was your profile? And let them put it in the chat, see what their feedback is, see if they think that the quiz matched what they really are. And then you have this slide here so that everyone can see and read for themselves what the different categories are. The next slide we talk about, and we want you to talk to the audience and the girls about why their privacy is important. And the real message here is that it's, in a lot of cases, it's about money. that people are after their personal information, sold. That also is a big deal because you can not only put yourself in danger, but you can put your family and your friends in danger as well. I think there's all kinds of stories that you could find. I would suggest maybe finding some from your personal life that you've known, or maybe someone that you've known has had their information stolen. I had a friend who had his Instagram public profile stolen, and then all the friend requests sent to all of his friends, and then all of his friends had their accounts compromised. This one is the point here is on the slide, but I think a little bit of personal touch adds a lot to this. The next one is about privacy policies. For the girls that have access to these things, or maybe have friends that have access to TikTok, Instagram, or Roblox, these are 3 examples, but almost everything has these lengthy do you agree policies. And you can probably make the point that none of them have read them before. I think a lot of adults don't even read them. So what we've done is we highlighted a few key statements from some of those to let them know that what they're actually signing or what they're actually clicking makes sense. And we put down in the note pages the takeaway from each of the 3. So the TikTok one basically says TikTok is reading all your messages. The Facebook one says that they're tracking your location, and Instagram as well. And Roblox one says that they're sharing information with third parties. So again, these are 3 examples. If you find some others, add them. And maybe there's a privacy policy for Among Us, which is popular right now. This slide is meant to be sort of a transition into another area or another topic, if you will. So then we begin to talk about what it means to be digitally responsible, or to have digital responsibility.
Ralph, can I just say one thing?
Yep.
When you're talking about like the different types of social media, it's okay to mention to the girls that if they don't have an account, any of those accounts, it's okay, because they're on the young side, and
Yep.
most of them won't have some of those things. So it's okay if they don't. We're just telling you about it so that when you do, that you're aware.
Yeah, we have that later, actually.
We do, and it's probably something to
Okay.
mention many times throughout, actually, Donna. That's a good point. Because we do have an explicit mention of it later, but maybe early on, we don't want the girls to kind of start to feel left out. But the chances are, if there are things that we mentioned, if they don't personally have access to them, they know someone who does. I think we make the point at the very end that anything that they've taken and they've learned from the slides, to take it and not only just use it themselves, but to talk to their family and their friends about it. They might see their parents doing something that, hey, do you have 2-factor authentication enabled? They might not have a phone to use a text message 2-factor authentication, but maybe their parents do. This slide right here is really just explaining to them about reputation. And like Donna mentioned earlier, and you want to really drill home to them that what they do online can last forever, and it can cause permanent damage to your reputation. I personally like the example of sports teams and organizations. They have privacy or social media and internet policies. So for the girls that might be on social media, it matters that they behave or do responsible things, because they could literally get kicked off of a sports team if their team finds out that they've done something that violates their policy. Employers, when they get to that point in life, they might think that, hey, I'm only in the 8th grade or the 7th grade now. Why does it matter? But when you go get a job or you go look for a job, those things can kind of stick around with them. And here, just to really sort of drill that point home, are the more of the news articles and clips that we pulled that shows that people in colleges are looking at profiles of students. I think we have one, right? A high school student was actually expelled from school. So you want to really make that point clear. We think the slide does, but if you find some more recent articles or something that might be more relevant in the news at the time, feel free. And this here, again, just drills it home one more time, but it's an acronym to think before you do any of those things, and is a true, helpful, inspiring, necessary kind. We move on now into electronic communications and how they should the etiquette that they need to be able to communicate with people digitally. It might seem obvious to us as adults, but it's not always obvious to them that they do need to be polite. They need to be mindful of someone they're talking to, understand when a situation is formal or informal. They might have access and be able to communicate, say, with teachers through a school email system. That they need to understand that they shouldn't use, LOL in a conversation with a school teacher. Yeah, I think that's about it for that one. Oh, and even spelling and grammar, I think Judy always reminds me of this one, is that everyone should make sure that you actually proofread what you write. You can type it. If you're angry at someone, don't send an angry text or an angry post or something like that. Even if you have to type it but never send it, there are different ways to do it, but you don't want to leave that footprint out there.
Right, and we were also talking about, and you can see in the notes, that there's different kinds of electronic communication that you don't really think of. And I had brought up, I guess, that I have conversations with my friends on the chat room and Words with Friends. And I mean, even that's there. It's, you just think you're just typing something, ha ha ha, but it's also there forever. So.
So then we talked to them about surfing the internet, and we define what cookies are. There's an example of how tracking cookies look, and I think Google Chrome is an example. But let them know there's that kind of an option for almost every single web browser. There's more about surfing the internet. I know that a lot of kids might get links from friends and say, hey, go download this onto your computer. Some of these tools that we have images for on the right are more popular amongst older kids, but even in the 7th and 8th grade, middle schoolers are getting links to things like Megas with the MS4 and Dropbox and say, hey, go download this cool new software. The message you want to draw home to them there is don't do that, and to always check with an adult before installing anything. With the use of cameras, and a lot of them will be on a Zoom call. So explain to them the value of covering up your camera. I know the little ones on the right are maybe $5 for a pack of 3, but a piece of tape works just as well to cover up a camera. Public devices, something that they might not think about, and just really caution them. I know schools have public computers a lot of times, libraries.
The Apple Store.
The Apple Store, where you can use it as if it's your own device, but you want to be very careful. You want to talk to them about, don't log into your email from that public computer. Definitely don't hit, we have a picture on the right of the save your password option. And any other examples you can think of. Then the last part of this block is really all about cyberbullying. So we don't need to go through each of the slides, but it starts off with a video. The idea of all the cyberbullying slides is something that a lot of them probably hearing from school, but we really think that in this lesson, they need to hear it again, and it can never be enough, because it's not just about them being cyberbullied. One of the slides, we actually talk about subtle ways. In fact, if we get down to we actually have examples. And it's a good idea at that point to talk to the girls and get them involved in the conversation and say, here's a message. Do you think it's cyberbullying? Have them explain why. See if you can get any of them to actually talk about it, to talk about some examples that they may have seen. And we have images, and there's examples of things that they might not have thought about in cyberbullying. But I mean, I know I've seen Roblox, and some of the people on Roblox are mean. And they're not necessarily kids. They're a lot of times they're adults. You don't know who's on the other end. So they might be a victim of cyberbullying, and they need to report it or tell someone. But they also need to be mindful that they're not doing those subtle things to cyberbully other people. More examples. And then this one sort of brings the cyberbullying home to really tell them how to respond. If they see it, if it happens to them, to really report it. That's the message that you want to send. And now we're at a break point. And so at the break point, there's a game that's a nice transition from cyberbullying. I think it's a Google powered game, and it's called Kind Kingdom. It's a keyboard-based game. This is the one that can be a little intense on computers. So you might want to tell them before the break that there's actually in the bottom right-hand corner, and we suggest you play the game yourself first. In the bottom right-hand corner of it, there's a low graphics option that'll generally speed up anyone who has a slug problems with the game kind of dragging. It works better on the web browser. I think it's all HTML5, so they would need to minimize or use the split screen, pull their web browser up. And then also mention that there's Kind Kingdom is one of 3 games. The links to the other games are in the bottom of this page as well. But we suggest they go play them, and you kind of get a score and get to do things, but give them a try yourself first.
Oh, a tip for the teachers is that you want to have one of your assistants being copying and pasting the stuff into the chat, because the kids can't click on those slides.
Yep.
So generally, you know that, but just in case you forgot.
Yep. So then we move into how they can protect themselves. The slides there is kind of a transition. Start off by talking about the general rules about don't interact with people you don't know. Be mindful of all the rules, no matter where or depending on what you're using between your parents and the schools, and never share private information. A lot of the other slides after this sort of peel those topics, peel the onion back on those topics, but really set the stage here and the tone here by letting them know those are general rules that they need to abide by. They have probably heard this and they can't hear it enough, but make sure that they're not trying to meet up with anyone that is trying to reach out to them. And if they see that, not to just ignore it, to actually go tell someone. This is the point Donna said to make sure we make, and we suggest now that you make it as many times and as often as you want, but they shouldn't feel pressure if they don't have access to some of these things. A lot of them won't to have them if they don't, that they don't need to feel left out. That they can take the information they have here and they can probably apply it to some aspect of what they do online. And if nothing else, they can help other people. This one's here sort of that is a neat cartoon. You give the girls a second to read that, but make sure they understand that you don't have to try to meet and live up to the standards of things and people that you see online. Some of those things are meant to draw them in and meant to get their attention, but they aren't actually real people living their real lives. They're almost actors, if you will. Here's some of the things that I think we kind of had blended over from the cybersecurity class, but these are examples of privacy settings, and which you really, I think we show examples here of, this is TikTok. The message here really is, here is some of the options in TikTok, but you want them to understand that there's similar settings in Roblox, there's similar settings in their Xboxes if they have them, in the PlayStations, almost anything that they might have access to. They want to really go through these settings and talk with an adult, talk about them, make sure that everyone understands what they are, and set it up that it's in a way that's protecting their privacy as much as possible. And then this slide goes through examples of device level permissions. There's an example in the middle of a Chromebook and what camera permissions look like. So when you kind of get those prompts, for those that have their own devices, that they always ask these questions. And the message here is to be mindful of what you click. You shouldn't just say yes. There's no reason I think we have, that's in the notes pages, but examples of why does a photo application need access? This photo editing application, why does it need access to your microphone? The answer is it probably doesn't. But you want to talk to them about being mindful of those and to review them frequently. And in the notes pages, we actually talked too about the dangers of jailbreaking or rooting devices. It's a neat thing to do. And it's something if they want to experiment with, they should probably do it with an old device and a grown-up. But when you do that, they should understand that their devices can become compromised, and some of the protections that are there to help keep them safe are removed when they do that. And then we move on in the next 3 slides to talk about personally identifiable information. And this is another opportunity you really want to get the girls involved. You want to talk about what PII is, but you don't want to give them all the answers up front. You really want to ask them, say, hey, here's a few examples. What else do you guys think is personally identifiable information? You want to challenge them and see how many they can put in the chat. See if anyone wants to come on and talk about what PII might be or some examples of what they've seen. And then when they're done, you give them a full list, and then you can ask them again, is there anything else you forgot? But again, the idea here is you really want the girls to be involved with this part. And this was just a neat cartoon that you should read. It gave us a chuckle. We hope it gives the girls a chuckle as well. So phishing is covered in cyber security, so we don't dig deep into it. But what we thought we would do here is just talk about, people think about phishing in a lot of cybersecurity courses. It's always defined as email, but make the point here that there are different ways that you'll get these attempts to send phishing through text messages or voicemails. And again, remind them that maybe they're not getting a text message, but if their parents or a grown-up or they have a friend and they see it, that they need to be mindful that there are people trying to trick them by sending them or contacting them in different ways to maybe click links or give up information. And then we have some examples here of those that seem, they're maybe not as obvious, but when you read them carefully, they always have some kind of a clue. Like, and a lot of them, like the Minecraft one, is very cleverly disguised for any of the girls that play Minecraft. If they see that, or maybe have access to someone else's email, see that, they'll probably be tempted to click it. And some of the girls might have opportunities to set their own passwords. So you really want to talk to them about what good passwords look like. And we give them a strategy and we talk about passphrases. I think what we did here, Judy, if I'm right, is we talked them through what good passphrases look like, and we asked them to get them involved again here, right? We asked them to put their passwords in the chat. What are some good ideas that they may have, right?
We told them to make up new passwords and put them in the chat.
Tell them, don't give you a password they might actually use.
We're not phishing.
Yeah. Because again, this class isn't they aren't building something at the end. So you want to take these kind of opportunities to bring the girls into the chat room and say, what are some passwords you guys might suggest that you use? Interact with them, use the TAs, let the TAs give them feedback if you're actively speaking and can't watch the chat yourself. I know I personally have a hard time doing that. So I almost exclusively rely on TAs to read some of the passwords. And two-factor authentication, this is a good one that they should talk to their parents about. I would even suggest, I don't know if I said this when we taught it, but they should actually go to their parents and say, hey, do you have access to your bank account from your phone? And the parent says, yes. And they should ask their parents, do you have two-factor authentication turned on for that? I would challenge them to, if not their own devices, for their parents or their friends, to make sure that two-factor authentication is turned on for really everything, but certainly things that they consider very sensitive, like bank accounts. You can define it for them, tell them it's something you have, something you know. And we'll have another picture of it, but a lot of times they're in the form of text messages. There's Google Authenticate. There's other technologies that you can certainly look up and add. We didn't add any more to the notes pages, but make them aware. And then we have another activity here. This one is a score-based one, right, Judy?
It's a quiz, yeah.
Quiz, right. And there's no bad score, but what you want to get them doing is to think about answering these questions. I think when I got to this slide, I challenged them that when they were done with it to actually take it again and see if they can improve their score, and then take it to an adult and have an adult do it and see if the adult score is higher than their score, and let it be sort of a way and a catalyst for them to begin conversations with their family and their friends who might not be as cyber savvy as they would be after going through this course. And then the last content slide we have here is career opportunities. So it's really taking a lot of the things that we talked about and mentioning a few of the careers that we could think of. You can think of others. I mean, really, it's pretty flexible, but I think the example I gave is the CAPTCHAs. Maybe I didn't, but the CAPTCHAs. I'm like, what career is it for the people who make those funny images, and then the technology that works behind it that actually has people type in those funny images and the letters that I can never quite read, and I always have to press the play record. Like, who does that? So let the girls know that as they're doing all these things and they're thinking about how to protect themselves, that there's lots of jobs behind that and career opportunities behind that for them to be creative and use those skills.
I know when you guys generally give us the plans, you put the career opportunities up front, but when we had the speaker, we put it towards the end so that could kind of start her off. So that one's kind of flexible, because talking about it at the beginning is kind of good too, because then you can show how all these things are related.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it makes more sense in their minds when they've seen some of the examples and worked through some of the exercises at the end. So it's a instructor preference, I think.
Yep.
There's a thank you and a survey, and then we always put the links in the chat, but in this presentation as well, we have all the links that were used, the quizzes and the exercises and the videos that were played. They're all at the end here within, I think, lots of slides. Oh, actually, I should add, there are links that were used in the slides, and then there's other useful links that we suggest that they take some time and go through, and certainly with their parents, that has lots and lots of neat information for kids and internet safety.
Yeah.
And one slide dedicated just for adults, right?
Yeah, one of the things about this talk is that we definitely want them to talk to their parents about it. There are some things that we can only touch on about like conversations they're having with strangers. There are very uncomfortable things, and we didn't want to talk about what they were, but we wanted that to be a guideline for them to talk to their parents about that.
And you can't mention that enough, I'll just say, because we did have a few girls mention that they made friends through playing with on games, but they had permission from the parents.
Right. And that's really the end.
Yeah.
And then I think at the end, we did have a guest speaker for this workshop. So this, up to that point, I think is about an hour, hour and a half, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
And then there are additional slides to go through if you want to run the workshop for the full 2
A
hours.
lot of them were pulled out of the cybersecurity ones and the encryption ones, I think. Yeah.
Yep. So there's like a interactive, you can go along with them, like use case, knowledge check that you can go through, and that's it. The other ones aren't in there anymore.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks great.
Yeah.
The girls did really enjoy this workshop, and it's information that really anybody could use. But
Yeah, definitely.
and it was surprising. There were a lot of things that the girls didn't know. So you did
Well,
cover
there
a
was
lot
the
of
one
things that they weren't aware
mom.
of.
Remember that one little girl said, "My mom just told me to ask you that she thinks what happened. She thought somebody had got her password, so we said probably you need to change your password, but we probably need more information to give you any more advice. So you should probably ask somebody." But the basic thing, like if you think somebody has your password, of course you're gonna need to change it. But now it's just funny. My mom just asked me to ask you guys if blah blah blah.
It's probably worth mentioning too that some of the things that maybe we didn't think the girls had access to, I had to stop. I'm a parent of a middle school. I had to stop and think like, wait a minute, my daughter has now more accounts than she did before coronavirus because she's got like school email accounts that I didn't even know about. And they're local and they're tied to the school only. But then it kind of hit me that, they have to understand these things probably more than ever now, since a fair amount of them have been doing some distance learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Well, it was a great workshop, and the girls really did enjoy it.
Good.
It's fun putting it together, fun teaching it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for summarizing and providing the video. It'll be very helpful for other instructors.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Ralph, do you want to stop sharing?